أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين يتبعون الرسول النبي الأمي الذي يجدونه مكتوبا عندهم في التوراة والإنجيل يأمرهم بالمعروف وينهاهم عن المنكر ويحل لهم الطيبات ويحرم عليهم الخبائث ويدع عنهم إصرهم وأغلال التي كانت عليهم فالذين آمنوا به وعزروه ونصروه واتبعوا النور الذي أنزل معه أولئك هم المفلحون آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our second discussion in our series entitled Decolonising the Muslim Mind. In our introduction yesterday, we began to discuss why we are talking about this particular series. And we stated that the verse that we have quoted from Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 157, is going to be the foundation verse of the entirety of our series. In fact, our entire 2 weeks discussion will be a commentary of one particular line within the entirety of this verse. The verse says, those who follow the apostle prophet, the Ummi, whom they have found written down in the Torah and the Injil, those who enjoin towards good and forbid the evil. Here now, the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam's mission statement is being given to you and I in this particular verse. It says that the Prophet does the following: وَيُحِلُّ لَهُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ, that he makes lawful to people the good things and he makes unlawful the impure things. وَيَذَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ, and he removes the burdens that were placed upon them. وَأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ, the mission of Rasulullah is to help break the shackles that were placed upon people. فَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِهِ وَعَزَّرُوهُ وَنَصَرُوهُ وَاتَّبَعُوا نُورَ الَّذِي أُنزِلَ مَعَهُ. As for those that believe in him, honor him and assist him, what do? They follow the light which has been sent down with Rasulullah, meaning the Holy Quran. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ, those people will be the successful ones. Our discussion over the 2 weeks is predicated on just 2 lines within this particular ayah, and those are the following: وَيَذَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ, that Rasulullah removes the burdens that were placed upon people, وَأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ, and breaks the shackles of those people. Now we stated that the series Decolonising the Muslim Mind suggests that the Muslim mind has been colonized. Colonialism or colonization means to be able to control something partially or in full for the purpose of exploitation. So here we mean that the Muslim mind has been colonized, has been shackled, has been captured in order to make it think and act in accordance with a certain system that is alien towards Islam, or the true Islam in its truest sense. What is this system? And we stated that there is a global system around the world which seeks to gobble people up in order to make them act the way the system wants them to act. That system is a very selfish system. That system is an exploiting system. The system seeks to put the individual ahead of the society's needs. The system seeks to remove God's centricity from the people and to create its own morality to replace a God-centric morality. And it is necessary for us to see and to know this system, the way in which the system works, and to see to what extent 1.6 billion Muslims around the world have been gobbled up into that system without them even realizing it. And yesterday we just started to be able to discuss what this system might be. And we stated this is only an introduction to our discourse, and so it is only meant to give us certain headlines. And of course, over the next 2 weeks, we will embark on the specifics of this discussion. If you remember yesterday, we mentioned 2 or 3 specific points about what that system looks like. We haven't even begun to name the system. We haven't even begun to give the history of the system. This will come. But now we mention what the system is showing us to be today. We mentioned yesterday, for example, that if you go into any supermarket and go to the area where there's the cereals, just the cereals, the morning breakfast that you and I eat, I asked the question, how many different types of cereal boxes are there? And someone in the crowd said 30, and someone said 50. We said, no, actually the number is far higher than this. The number we stated is one can find, and you can actually Wikipedia this, there's an actual page on how many different types of cereals there are, and the name of each and every type of brand, and whether they're still presently able to be bought or not. There are 387 different types of cereals and 16 or 17 brands. Why do we bring this up? We say because it's just one type of food. We're not talking about fruit, we're not talking about yogurts, we're not talking about different types of drinks. We're just talking for a moment about cereal. If there are 380 odd different types of cereal, that shows that there's an abundance of food, but an abundance of choice of food as well. You walk into any type, Tesco's, Asda, Morrison's, and you'll see all this abundance of food for you and I to be able to choose from and bask in. At the same time, tonight, 1/3 of the world will go to sleep hungry because they did not have access to food. What does this show you? It shows you that there is an imbalance within the world where 2 billion people, children of this age, mothers, fathers, grandparents, people who are 70 and 80 years old, do not have access to food. But here we have an abundance of food. There is a complete imbalance in that. Does that happen haphazardly? Is this an accident? Is this just a coincidence that in 2016 we have arrived at this? We also mentioned yesterday, think about this. According to statistics, 4 billion people in this world do not have access to clean water. They drink dirty water. And we mentioned yesterday, as an example, the BBC had interviewed, only a few weeks back, a woman in Karachi, one of the largest cities in the world. And she said she only has access to water once every 15 days. And the little amount of water that she gets once every 15 days has to suffice her entirely. How much water can an elderly woman carry? She has to drink, she has to bathe, she has to clean clothes, she has to wash dishes, she has to feed her family with this water. Yet, on the other side of the very same city in Karachi, the rich and powerful have swimming pools filled with water. There must be something wrong with the world. There must be something imbalanced for the world to be in this particular way, where so many people have such access and so few people have such little access to certain things. Is this haphazard? Well, I pose another question to think about. We're still introducing the topic and what we mean by this system, and whether Islam is really challenging this system today. What Islam is living, what Islam is being taught and presented to us. At the same time as humanity not having access to food and water, at the same time this humanity has managed to land a probe on Mars, the planet. We have now conquered Mars. The plan is now to send the next probe further and further and further. We can see into the depths of the universe. We now are thinking about having driverless cars. You will have seen what's happening. You know, scientists today of various different engineering fields, and this is true, I'm giving you a snippet of what the world is like and the imbalance of this world. And I ask you, where is Islam and where is the Muslim to challenge this world that is the system that is present today? How have we got here? Right now, engineers are working with neurobiologists to do the following. Right now they are testing to put a nanochip. Do you know what a nanochip is? You know you have a microchip. Even smaller than that is the nanochip. A nanochip may fit on the head of a pin. They are trying to put a nanochip within the human brain so that it contains the information that is the level of what is available to you in Google into your brain. So that when your mind has a question, it can download from this nanochip the extent of which is available within Google. This is what they're testing out at the moment. Do you have any doubt for a minute that we will not achieve that? And more? Is this so difficult for us to think that in 50 or 100 years, the exponential growth that we have had in engineering and in science and in technology that we have seen in the last generation? My elders, and people maybe even my age and slightly older, they will remember when we used to use a computer, the 286. Do you remember the 286 computer? Do you remember how slow it was in MS-DOS? And look at the technology that we have today. Is there any doubt what we will achieve within 50 years? Whilst the human being is so capable and flying ahead in these particular matters, today 2 billion people will go to bed hungry because they do not have access to food or to clean water. There's something wrong, isn't there? And we said yesterday a simple question. The Islam of the Prophet was a liberating Islam. أَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. It broke the shackles that were placed upon society. This means that true Islam, Islam haqiqi, the reality of what Islam is a liberating religion for society. It is changing the features of society. At one point, the Hijazan community were burying their daughters alive. At the next minute, they are the champions of humanity. The presence of true Islam liberated these very same backward people. I ask a simple question. Does Islam in its context today liberate society? Today, just today, we saw the mass shooting, the evil shooting in Orlando. Just now we have heard about the bombs that have taken place in Beirut today, just an hour ago. 2 days ago, the bomb at Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam. 4 days ago, the bomb in Karbala. This is one side of Islam, which we know has no reality relationship to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. But what about the Islam that you and I espouse? Is it dealing with the challenges of the time? And we mentioned yesterday one of the great challenges, global warming, the utmost destruction of our planet, the imminent destruction of our planet. Having weapons of mass destruction, where in a moment an entire country can be wiped out. And we will talk about these things in detail. And I ask a simple question. If Rasulullah was here, if Mahdi salamullahi alayhi was here, would they not conceive of these things to be at the forefront of the challenges of their time? Islam today has lost its essence, the essence of breaking the shackles of society. We have prayer, we have Sawm, we have Hajj, we have Zakat, we have Khumus, we have Ziyarah. But the essence of what the religion was supposed to be, أغلال التي كانت عليهم, has all but been lost. And why is that? And the series argues because Muslims and Islam has been subsumed into colonization. And this is where we stopped yesterday. What type of colonization? Not physical colonization. We are not taken on slave ships. It is subsumed into a mental, cultural colonization, where the overriding practices that are present within the world, the status quo, subsumes the Muslim world into it. And this is why 1.6 billion Muslims, by and large, other than the outward practices that we have, are indistinguishable from the rest of the world. The rest of the world has their dress code. Na'udhu billah, some people are in skirts and some people are in shorts and t-shirt. We are in hijab and we are in abaya and we are in amama and we wear dishdasha and we wear... The external is there. The difference can be seen. But to what difference is there in the essence of the religions between themselves? And this is the topic that we wish to be able to discuss over these next 2 weeks, inshaAllah. Now, to take this introduction forward and to be able to appreciate this in a further level, why is this the case? When a human being is born, they are born into an overriding environment, and it is natural for the human being to adopt that environment. As you know, human beings have two facets of development. They have their nature and they have their nurture. The nature are those things which are biological, physiological, those things which are fitriyun, born into their innate nature. On the other side, we have the nurture side, where we become molded in accordance with our environment, our parents, our community, what happens in the Husayniyya. If, for example, there is a certain culture within the Husayniyya, whatever that culture is, the youth will grow up within that culture for it to be the norm as well. This is known. Think about it, for example. We mentioned when you and I were growing up, we had the 286 and the 486. As a result of that, what were the types of games that we played on the computer? Then when the next generation grew up, they had PlayStation and they had Nintendo 64 and other things. So they grew up in accordance with knowing these things. Now the even younger shabab of today, when they grow up, everything is now on the phone. Everything is now an iPad, for example. So they grow up very quickly, and from the age of 1 and 2 years old, you will see kids, they already know the password to their father's phone or to their mother's phone, and they're already able to play the games on it. A person cannot help but acclimatize themselves to the overriding environment that they're brought up into. If now there is a global environment, social media, newspapers, TV, film, language, magazines, sports, if there's a global culture, by and large, very rarely does a human being think outside of that culture. They adopt that culture for themselves because that is all they know as the culture is. This is normal. We know this within developmental psychology. Based upon that, what we see today, when you have 1.6 billion Muslims that live within a certain environment, whatever the global environment is, by and large, the Muslim will also adopt that very same environment and champion it as their own. They will not see it as alien to Islam. They will see it as Islam and adopting it within Islam. Let me give you an example. Very simple one, and we're going to talk about this in some detail. Now this might be a little controversial, or it might poke at some sensitivities of people, but I'm purposely doing that. So you'll have to forgive me, because I want you to think for yourself, to break the way in which we are told to think within this world, the way in which the environment shapes our thinking. In Islam, we have something called the Ummah. We all know this. The Ummah is one Ummah, correct? Muslims are but brothers of each other. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Surely the believers are but brothers of each other. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we know, says that He has made us of different tribes and nations for the purpose of لِتَعَارَفُوا, to get to know one another, not to create separation between one another. You are from this tribe, you are from this tribe, you are from this tribe, fine, but you are Muslims, you are humanity, get to know each other. Do not create things that artificially separate you. In Islam, we believe in one nation, all Muslims under one banner. Today, that notion has been completely obliterated. How? We've been divided into nation states. National pride is more important than the pride and the need of the Ummah. So what happens? And we're going to talk about the Enlightenment period in the 17th and 18th century in detail. But what happens? We become divided. People place these little fake lines between us, and now you are Iraqi and you are Irani. You are now Indian, you are now Pakistani. You are now Bahraini, you are now Kuwaiti. And instead of championing the need of the Ummah, you will see people championing the need of their nation state. The state is more important than the needs of mankind now. The state is more important than the needs of the Muslim Ummah. What comes first? Nationalism. And you will see hundreds of millions, if not billions of Muslims falling into this trap, championing their nation state. Let me give you a simple example. And I said, I'm going to challenge, and you may think this is right or you may think this is wrong. Think about these things for yourself and the impacts that these thought processes have upon us. Imagine I got the border between Iran and Iraq. Now, I'm not talking about Sunnah, I'm not talking about non-Shia, I'm talking about just the Shia community for a moment. Just think about this conceptually. And we said, the Iraqi, you are Shia Ithna Ashariya. The Irani, you are Shia Ithna Ashariya. You follow the same religion, you follow the same madhab. Get rid of the boundary and the border between yourselves. Become an ummah again once. What do you think they would say? Do you really think they would get rid of that boundary between themselves and champion one ummah for the sake of Rasulullah? No, our national pride, but we are Iraqi, but we are Irani, and we are Pakistani, and we are Indian, and we are... And so these things have become more important than the ummah itself. Simple question, is that an Islamic notion? Or is that a Western notion, national identity? What's happening in France yesterday and today? I don't like you because you're French. I don't like you because you're Russian. You don't like me because I'm British. And so, we're going to fight with each other because I have a different flag, because my language is different. How petty the human being has come. How nonsensical the human being is, that it puts its nation's need more than the need of humankind itself. And now these resources are mine, and I need to capture your resources. And now I need to see you as the other. You are Polish and therefore you are lesser than me. I don't want you immigrating to my country. You are Romanian, I don't want you immigrating into my country. You are Pakistani, you are Indian, you are Iraqi, you are Irani, you are Khoja, you are... This is not Islam. But Muslims champion these things, thinking that this is Islam. Why? Because an alien culture has consumed the Muslim mind, and we have been colonized into thinking these ways. Just think about these things very carefully. We're going to talk about this in detail, inshallah, in the history and development of this. Now, if you see that this is a particular issue that is prevalent within our community, the way in which we think, the way in which we are forced to live, the way in which we champion certain ideals, we go back to the Quran and we go back to the introduction to this particular verse. There is something which we know as human rights. And we've all heard of the concept of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We also know that Muslim states gather together and write their own Muslim rights, their own Declaration of Human Rights. You may also know that there is something known as the African Charter of Human Rights. Why? Because for the African communities, they wanted to write what they thought were their own human rights. And there's an African Charter. In fact, this charter is slightly different because there is human rights and there's also something known as people's rights. Peoples are the collective group. So for example, peoples may be a nation state, it may be a culture, it may be a small community, but either way, not just as the human individual have right, but a collective also has rights as well. And these are known as people's rights. Most people are unaware that there is such a thing, but this is good for us to be able to research. In the African Charter of the People's Rights, there is article number 20. And article number 20 is very interesting as to how it perceives people's rights within humanity. It mentions 3 different types of rights for people collectively. Number 1, the right of those who are colonized to free themselves. If a person has been colonized, it is their human and people-based right to be able to free themselves from colonization. We are saying here that Islam as a religion, and thus the 1.6 billion Muslims, have been culturally colonized, and as a result, it would be within our rights to challenge those notions and to free ourselves from whatever that culture is. Number 2, we also have a right to be able to struggle against domination. It is the right of a people to say that you are being dominated by something external and that you have the right to struggle against that particular thing. In our context, this isn't a physical struggle. You and I are taking an intellectual journey through the cultural and mental colonization that has taken place. And so these rights are a mental right for you and I to be able to think about these particular issues and to see whether we have or have not been culturally subsumed into a certain way of living and whether we do need to break from that particular thing. There's an interesting statement, one of the most profound statements that I have ever come across from a non-ma'soom. May Allah bless her for the good work that she did. You may have heard of an abolitionist by the name of Harriet Tubman. Have you heard of Harriet Tubman? In the late 19th century and earlier 20th century, she was involved in the liberation of black slaves in the United States of America. And she, of course, was someone who led many people out of slavery. Harriet Tubman said something very interesting. She said, "I freed 1,000 slaves." She would free them. She would help them across rivers. She would physically help them in a way in which they could break bondage of slavery. So she says in a famous quote, "I freed 1,000 slaves, but I could have freed 1,000 more had they known they were slaves in the first place." There were individuals that didn't realize that they had been made slaves. They understood it in the intellectual level, that I have physical bonds upon me. I'm not a free person. I've been bought. I have to work on the plantations. But when it came to the reality of the consciousness of the state in which they were living in, they had not understood that they were actually slaves to a system. And in fact, they were so inured by that system that they fought for the system or to remain within that system. And hence, Harriet Tubman says, I could not break another 1,000 people free because they refused to accept that they were within a state of slavery in the first place. Just think about that statement for a minute. What's being said? Why would a black person whose forefathers have been shipped, be it from the coasts of Africa or the coasts of the Caribbean to mainland United States of America, when they have to walk out of the plantation to buy something, they have to have a chain around their neck with the number and the name of their slave owner. Then when a person seeks to break them from it, they think that they are not slaves. Why would that happen, do you think? Because they are so inured by that society and that mode of living that they think that this is what they have come to be. You know what they did? They used to divide the slaves into different groups. You had the plantation slave, you had the house slave, and you had the slave that would work directly for the slave owner, the manager of the other slaves. Also a black person, also a slave, but he would manage the other slaves. You know what he would do? He would be as ruthless and as brutal to the slaves as he was once had upon himself when he was a slave on the plantation. Yesterday, he was a slave alongside everybody else. Today, he is whipping and beating the very people that he was also a slave with. And so when Harriet Tubman comes to free this man and says, you are a slave, you deserve better, you deserve freedom, you're a human being, all people are essentially born free, the person says, no, I have a good job. I'm a manager of 50 slaves. They look up to me. Yes, I still have to say, yes, massa. They couldn't say master. They said, yes, massa, to their slave owner. But I also have slaves underneath me now. And so when someone like Harriet Tubman sought to give them freedom, they did not want it because they were inured by the system that had colonized them. You'll find many Muslims the very same way. If you were to identify aspects that have proven that they are slaved within a system, they would say, no, this is normal, this is good for us. Brother, we should live like everybody else lives. We're supposed to be like the rest of the world. We're not supposed to be extreme. What are you talking about? And then you go back to this verse and you compare it to the way in which people lived 1400 years ago and the same challenges that Rasulullah had to break the mindset of the people in that time. Think about this for a second, just for a moment. One of the most interesting things of the time in which we live in is that there is an increase in the number of people that are getting cancer. May Allah protect us all from the debilitating disease of cancer. Only a few years ago, 1 in 5 people got cancer. 2 years ago, Cancer Research UK, they had announced that 1 in 3 people in the United Kingdom would get cancer. Only a few weeks ago it was announced 1 in 2 people will now get cancer. Half the people in this room will get cancer of some kind, statistically speaking. You may beat it, you may succumb to it. Now, of course, there are other diseases. There will be heart attacks, there will be diabetes, there will be, all the other issues that come. But we're talking about cancer. Think about this for a minute. We are increasing in the number of people that are getting cancer, and we know about it. It's not like the reasons are unknown today. What are the reasons that cancer happens? For example, number one, smoking. The carcinogens that we put into our body. And the second-hand and passive smoke that goes around. Number one. Number two, the second major reason for cancer and the increase in cancer is the amount of meat that we eat within our diets. Especially red meat. But the increase of meat is a huge causal factor for why cancer comes. Third, fizzy drinks. And the amount of fizzy drinks that we drink. Now think about this for a second. We realize these things, we know these things, but we continue to do it. When you drink 1 can of fizzy drink, 1 can of fizzy drink, it is the equivalent of 23 packets of sugar into your body. What do we think happens to our body when 23 packets of sugar are placed into our system all at once? In order to balance out the amount of sugar and the acid alkaline in our bodies, from 1 can of fizzy drink, it requires you to drink 17 glasses of water in order just to balance out what's happening to your body. Human beings know it. Human beings realize it. They realize the damage it does to their internal system. Yet, a human being will come and drink and drink and drink and drink. Why? Because the overriding environment has dictated to you and I that this is how we should live. There are 2 billion people that will go hungry tonight, and there will be millions of Muslims that will go outside into Dixie Chicken and into, what are these other chicken places called? Chicken Cottage. And these stale chickens that have been pumped with all these nasty chemicals to make them fat within 6 weeks so they can be cut. And they've been sitting there in this light for 12 hours, just rotting away, being kept warm. And we will gobble these things up. Knowing what is put into these things. And still we will put these things into our system. Why? Why is this the norm? Because this is the environment we have grown up into, and we adopt it for ourselves, realizing that this is an alien culture to Islam. And then when we get cancer, we say, Ya Allah, why did you test me with cancer? My Lord, why have you forsaken me? What did I do wrong? I gave charity all my life. I went to Hajj, I went on ziyarah. My Lord, why did you do this to me? It's painful. Why am I being blasted with these chemotherapy rays? Why did I lose my hair? Why is my skin full? Really? But you drank Dr. Pepper for 50 years of your life. What did you think was going to happen to your intestines? Now think about this for a second. Can you imagine the companions of Rasulullah? Ali ibn Abi Talib, Hussein ibn Ali, Ja'far al-Sadiq, or Imam al-Mahdi, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, living like this? That they actually put into their system, their own bodies, that which they know gives them cancer, that which destroys them spiritually. Can you imagine Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari? Can you imagine Miqdad ibn Aswad al-Kindi? Can you imagine Abu Dharr al-Ghifari doing these things? And this is why the ummah of Rasulullah was so successful, because it had the worst of people, it had the worst of practices. They would bury their daughters alive. They would perform tawaf of the Kaaba naked. They would go to war with each other for the simplest of things. They would even sell their own family members into prostitution. This is what they did at the time of Rasulullah's time. Yet Rasulullah broke the shackles that were upon them in order for them to become the best of people that lived. They lived within a society that gobbled them up into practices. Now I conclude with a question that I asked yesterday. And this is our introduction finished. Yesterday and today, and tomorrow inshallah, we go into the verse and we begin to discuss the issue in detail. But I leave a question that I asked you yesterday. If you were born into the Hijazan community 1400 years ago with Rasulullah, would you have buried your daughter alive after birth? Would you have prostituted your own family member out in order to pay off your debts? Would you have performed tawaf of the Kaaba naked? Everybody said, no, I would not have done that. No way, I could bury my daughter alive. Such an immoral catastrophe upon the human soul. And I responded with the following. The only way for you to know whether you would have buried your daughter alive, whether you would have sold your own grandmother or sister into slavery to pay off your debts, would be to know whether today you have managed to liberate yourself, break the shackles of society that you're living in today. If you and I succumb to the same societal pressures today, I would have succumbed to those societal pressures 1400 years ago. And when my daughter was born, I would have buried my daughter alive. There is no doubt in that whatsoever. If, however, I am not plagued by that society today, and I've learned to become liberated, I can think for myself, I can implement Islam haqiqi, the reality of submission on journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then certainly I would have been born in that way 1400 years ago. I tell you something. There was only one family in the Hijazan community 1400 years ago that did not suffer the ills of that time. And that was the family of Hashim, the family of Abu Talib, the family of Rasulullah Salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. Meaning that if you and I could have broken our shackles today, we would have broken our shackles yesterday. But moreover, we would not just be like companions of Rasulullah, we would have been from the family of Rasulullah himself. We would have been Banu Hashim and everything that comes with the accolade spiritually of being like Banu Hashim. And this is our topic, brothers and sisters, inshallah, for you and I to analyze the global atmosphere and to see how Islam as a religion has been co-opted, Muslims have been co-opted, and how you and I can break the shackles of living in the trials of 2016. Yes, we will pray, but how do we arrive at the fullness of our submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Walhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi al-Tahirin.